populations. So that's what I want to just frame this for you. Some of you may have heard me speak in the past, and maybe some of you have not, but I'm good. If you have never heard me utter any words about breast cancer or why we should do population prevention, then I will get you there. So
right,
I see most people. Oh, I see somebody from Nebraska, which is great. Sacramento. So maybe we can get started. So we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'll do a quick intro, and then Funmi, I'll pass it over to you. So again, welcome to the Wisdom Community Forum for March of 2024. If you haven't yet, please introduce yourself in the chat and what brought you to the forum today. I'm Allison Fiscalini. I'm the director of the Athena Network and the Wisdom Study. I've been working with the team since the study was first conceived and put into, implemented into practice for recruitment, and happy to be here and help to guide the discussion today. So the format for today, we do want to hear from you. We'd love to hear your questions. You can put those in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat and can help to raise questions that are timely, and others that can wait till the end. We'll make sure there's enough time at the end as well. And just feel free to submit your questions throughout, and we'll get those answered. If you're not speaking, if you could mute yourself, just so there's no background noise. And the meeting will be and is being recorded. So if you want to see this again or share it with friends, you're welcome to do so. And there will be a short survey at the end as well. So our mission for these wisdom forums, we've been doing them for, let's see, I think about 2+ years now, is really to bring together both the research and scientific community, as well as the general community, patient community as well, together to move together toward equity and better outcomes in breast cancer for everyone. So we've had a whole host of different topics over the last couple of years. These are all saved on our YouTube channel, and you're welcome to access those whenever you'd like. We'll send a link out after this call. And this one will also be posted as well. So this month we'll be talking about genetic risk across diverse populations. And very, very pleased and excited to have Dr. Funmi Olopade presenting. She is our site principal investigator for the Wisdom study at UChicago, and is really a thought leader both in breast cancer oncology as well as genetics, and really excited to hear her speak today. So I will stop sharing and let Funmi take it away.
Thanks, Allison. And I see that we have 3 pages, lots of people. If I haven't responded to you personally, let me introduce myself. So I talk about genetics, and for a very long time, I had been talking about genetics. But I realized that we can't really stop at genetics because we don't know nearly enough. And so I became really passionate about what I call modifiable genetic and non-genetic risk factors for breast cancer, right? So, genetics doesn't determine your whole life. This is where epigenetics comes in, where even if you were born able to have a perfect pitch, and then your parents never gave you the opportunity to even play the piano or listen to music, then even though you had that gene passed on, you would never be able to express it. So that's what I bring to breast cancer, and why, after really being a breast medical oncologist, that's what I call myself for decades, I now call myself as a preventive oncologist, because I think, waiting for people to have cancer before you reach them is really a failure of prevention. I grew up in Nigeria, so that you can know where I'm coming from. And we learned in medical school preventive and social medicine. So I'm going to talk a lot about preventive and social medicine. And people often talk about social determinants. And I just finished teaching a course in Paris. That's why I couldn't be with you in the last month. I was teaching my students, and I took them to the WHO, the World Health Organization. And the reason I placed my course in Paris is because it's really important for us to think about knowledge can come from anywhere. These are wonderful young American students. Some of them want to go to medical school. When they got to the WHO, some of them said, you know what, I'm not going to medical school. Dr. Olopade, can I become a public health person? Can I warn people about health? Because, of course, lessons learned from the pandemic, we just became so divided about what should not have divided us. So I really want you to think about World Health Organization, because it's not that absence of disease is what, health is about well-being, and it's not the absence of disease. And so I'm talking about modifiable genetic and non-genetic risk factors for breast cancer. And in April, in another 2 weeks, the Lancet Breast Cancer Commission is going to come out and talk about what we need to do, all of us, to modify our risk for breast cancer, because we never take it personally. So that's why my topic has changed. And it's because my students forced me to say, Dr. Olopade, we have to have a better lifestyle. So let's think about that now. Okay, so why is this important? Because I actually started my clinic at the University of Chicago, and I called it Cancer Risk Clinic, because, unknowns to me that nobody actually believes in prevention. I came from Nigeria, and I thought, oh, the minute I had a moment to practice prevention instead of transplanting breast cancer patients, I'm going to start a clinic. And at that time, we had no gene to test for. We didn't have BRCA1. But guess who flooded my clinic? Breast cancer survivors, ovarian cancer survivors. Because women, and when we talk about gender, and I know at the last time I presented at this forum, we talked about being gender neutral and really making sure that we talk about risk and that there are many different risk factors. So when I tell my student that in 1992, I thought I'm just going to be a preventive oncologist, I'm going to start a clinic. And it turns out that my patients actually didn't believe me, because they were like, how could you be sure? You're just like the soothsayer, right? You're saying there's a probability that you're going to get cancer. And because I practice on the south side of Chicago, my patients were like, we're not into that, right? We have all the daily struggles of existing. Now you want to tell us we're at risk for cancer. Don't bring that on us, right? Power of positive thinking. And so this year, after, really reflecting on what did we accomplish in 30 years of talking about risk assessment, I changed my clinic, and now we're doing preventive oncology, because we actually have been able to answer that question. It's not age. It doesn't really matter how old you are. Anybody can get cancer. And, Princess Catherine has been in the news. Everybody is thinking, what happened? How do you predict, preempt, prevent, and intercept or treat cancer? So my goal is that all of us can join wisdom, because what we want to do is really think about how we prevent and intercept cancer. So that's my, main pitch. But then I also know that we're now in a polarized world where everybody is divided on race, ethnicity. And so, my students, throughout the time we were in Europe, it was about decolonize global health, right? Why are we still talking about the North and the South and all the people and Black and brown, and who is Black, who's brown, the identity, everybody, just the students are so militant. So I have to tell them, look, you're here to support history, because history actually informs our future. And so majority of Black women, and when you talk about Black and brown in the US, people would say it's a social construct. When I talk about Black in Nigeria, it's not a social construct. We are Black and proud in Nigeria, and we always say that, right? Because that's the color of our skin. But then the young one would say, well, but somebody said you were Black. Well, whatever it is, melanin is what makes you have a skin color. And we're all different shades of Black. But during, when this paper came out, and I know some of you, how many of you have done 23andMe? You went because you really wanted to know where you're from, and you went and got that 23andMe test. Raise your hands, or just by show of hands, right? How many of you are curious? Because these days, I have so many people who come to me and say, oh, I'm part Neanderthal. The one I love is when I see somebody, oh, I'm Nigerian. I'm like you. I was like, wait. You can't just be Nigerian just like that because you got 23andMe. There's a lot more, right? But the thing is that because genetics is so popularized now, anyone can go in, spit in a cup, and you get somebody tell you are part, and the thing that trips me is when I'm in my clinic and somebody who is Italian, her husband is Italian, and then then the wife is Irish, and then the Italians and the Irish are fighting in my clinic. I was like, well, you all came from somewhere, right? And then you all came to Chicago, and you all stay in your neighborhood. And you may all have married in high school if you went to Catholic high school. But the thing is that Chicago is the center of the universe. And because I practice there, I see people of different shades and color. But the thing that is important for all of us to know is that if you go to the US, if you go to Britain, Europe, if you go to the Caribbean islands, and if people are curious about where they came from, people would talk about, oh, I've done this. So what 23andMe did when they did this study was to say, okay, there were people who were colonized by Belgium, and all those people came from Congo, and they got across the Atlantic, and then they landed, and many of them, depending on when they landed, they had really violence. So this is where people talk about violence, raping of women, gender violence, and then where people talk about intersectionality, where Black women and Black and brown women, whether people see you as who you are or they want you to hide your identity, it's really created significant, division in our country. But the other thing that's also important is, so Brazil is a country that is huge. There's some countries that don't even want you to mention that you are from anywhere. France is one of those where it's a republic, they fought for it. If you are in France and it doesn't matter whether you're in the island or not, they want you to say you are French, right? So there are people who have dual citizenship, who remember their, old country. They want to celebrate their culture. And, this is, we just celebrated St. Patrick's Day, right? There's no one who doesn't go out in Chicago when we dye a river in green, and everybody comes out because it's a cultural celebration of immigration, of survivorship, of thriving in America. And now we're in this new country. So when I talk about this, I talk about our genetic ancestry. Where did we come from? So now we can use DNA and we can find, okay, this is where you come from. But the important thing is, because of the history of violence on Black and brown populations, we now have what we call admixture. And that is where the talk that Dr. Ziv gave last month, talked about genetic admixture. What percentage Black are you? Are you 100% African? And so you will see this gradation, this purple here, 95 to 100%. There are people in the South who are ethnic Nigerians because they landed in the South, they didn't have any admixture. When you look at their blood, when you look at their DNA, it's like they never left Africa, right? So when you look at a place in Bahia where the slaves who returned to Nigeria, they actually returned and they called Lagos. I grew up in Lagos. Lagos is a Portuguese name. It's not an African name. But if you ask anybody, where do you live? I'm a Lagosian. We still have the Brazilian quarters in Nigeria. So that transatlantic trade got some people to go to Bahia. They stayed there. They kept their religion. They worship Ogun, Yemoja, all the gods of Yoruba is what the Catholic Church co-opted because they needed to have this indigenous Black people worship whoever they wanted to worship. And they go across. In Cuba, you will hear about Santeria. So we can't forget that genetics and religion can sometimes collide, okay? And that's why it becomes really important for us, if we're talking about genetic justice, to understand what does it mean to be African, to have percent African. You can see in Argentina, you can say everybody is from, is Latin America, is Latino, is Hispanic. But you can see if you're from Argentina, you're almost 100% white, right? And very little African ancestry because of social construction. Whereas as you go from southern Brazil all the way to the north, you're going to have the indigenous populations, right? We talk about the Americans who were there before we came. And this is what Dr. Ziv has been studying, where if you say you are Hispanic, there's actually indigenous blood that's mixed. And so when we say you are from Mexico or you're from Brazil, it may mean different things depending on who is in your country. And that's why we can say we're all in it together, or we're all our own little population, and we need to study us. So that's what I wanted to explain as we begin to think about genetics and non-genetic risk factors for cancer. So if Black women have the highest death rate from breast cancer, okay, and the question really is, why do they have the highest death rate from breast cancer? This is where my social scientists will come in and say, oh, it's because of racism. It's because of the violence, the barriers, and all of that. So if those barriers are there, how do we break them down? That's why when Dr. Esserman and I, we met and we've traveled across Africa together, and and every time she asked me, wisdom, how many Black women are participating in wisdom? When she told me 48, I was like, 48? Have you thought about bringing it to Chicago? I'll get all my people to come and participate. And guess what? That's how we became participants in wisdom. We did the same thing with iSpy. If you take your study to where people live, they are just as likely to want to participate. So I want to thank everyone who's participated and who really believes in equity and the fact that we really need to do this work in solidarity. So that's why when we're talking about breast cancer is not one disease, we wouldn't have known that breast cancer is not one disease if we didn't do the research, right? And I love this because I'm an American Cancer Society professor. And the first grant I ever got was from the American Cancer Society. American Cancer Society, they run Relay for Life. They're in every community. And my friend, Otis Brawley, was the chief medical director at American Cancer Society. And when we look at this data, we were like, when there were no treatments, there was no racial disparity. Everybody died at the same rate from breast cancer. The reason why you have disparity is because the minute we start having effective treatment, can you see, 1970, there was no racial disparity. We didn't do research. We didn't know what was going on. We were in the dark ages. And then the National Cancer Institute was formed because we wanted to declare war on breast cancer. I became a breast cancer researcher because I saw women marching on Washington as part of the AACR National Action Plan. What are we going to do with this rising epidemic of breast cancer? And guess what? Thank God women rose up to say we've got to win this battle. So when this paper was published in 2019, and then revised in 2022. And now I'm chairing the ACS Roundtable on Breast Cancer. We're going to every community because it's even too high that all these white women are dying from breast cancer. That is why this is important for us. It's not that we don't have people still dying from breast cancer. We think the job is done. The problem with the work, the way we've done it, is that we introduced mammogram and everybody started doing mammogram. And we got some DCIS, and then we overtreated women. But guess what? We did our first prevention study with tamoxifen was in 1992, was the first prevention study I did. And when I saw that, I was like, everybody should just have tamoxifen in their water. And everyone laughed at me because they were like, well, are you kidding me? A tamoxifen that can cause cancer. No, we're not doing that. And then mortality is 19% higher for Black women for hormone receptor positive breast cancer, despite 22% lower incidence. And you know what happened? Tamoxifen was not generic. The minute it became generic, it became cheap. Now, whenever you do an oral drug that insurance doesn't cover, guess what? If you're out of luck and you have to pay for it, it's too expensive. So I would write tamoxifen in the 90s for my patients. And these are my patients who don't have the luxury of paying $200 copayment for their tamoxifen. Even though we know that it could save their lives, they still died. So people would say they're non-adherent, but some of the time they're not adherent because there were side effects, too many side effects. And so no woman wants to be on a drug that they have to take for 5 years. It is expensive, and then they stop. So just yesterday, the New York Times was talking about women, people stopping their medication because of side effects. So why are they stopping their medication? Because of side effects. Why, when I ask my people in my community, why don't you want to take the vaccine? Well, they don't want to get sick. They don't want to get sick because they are working every day. They can't miss one day of work, right? So if you're going to do something that's going to make them miss one day of work, that's too costly for some patients. So if you have 40% overall mortality and you now have hormone receptor negative breast cancer, that's twice as high for Black women, then what is it that we're doing? What are we screening for? That's why Wisdom wants to learn, and we want to actually say one size doesn't fit all. We have to personalize how we do risk assessment. So that's really why I'm excited that we are learning. And I want to just give you, as we continue to do this history, this is a white woman in my clinic who did what everybody asked her to do. 68-year-old, aggressive triple negative breast cancer. Go and get your breast cancer screened every 2 years. And she went, 3603, no cancer. 3805. She was only 2 days late. Okay? Because everyone would say, oh, well, you were in denial. 2 days late. Look at how dense her breast is. By the time she was large breasted, she had dense breasts. Nobody said anything about her breast density. She developed breast cancer. She was dead in 1 year. No matter what medication we gave to her, she just progressed through it. So these days, when I'm talking to women, I'm like, do you know what kind of breast cancer you're going to have? Whether you're Black or white, do you know whether you're going to get ER negative breast cancer or ER positive? If you don't know, if you have dense breasts, you better join Wisdom, because we really need to learn what is causing this aggressive breast cancer. And that's why I'm so excited that we want to do this work in solidarity. It's not about Black or white. So when I began, because I study aggressive breast cancer, so why would this woman have done everything we asked her to do, and still she died before the age of 70? And now that I'm getting close to 70, I'm thinking 70 is the new 40, right? She's not that old. That's premature, right? So what is the definition of aggressive breast cancer? And then we ask, could the burden of lethal breast cancer in Black women at least be due to differences in the risk factors, right? What is the burden of the risk factor? Which part is African and which part is actually diaspora? And for those of you who don't, know your geography, because I turned out that my students, when they were in Europe, some of them were coming out of America for the first time, and they thought the world began and ended in Oklahoma. And I was like, no, there's more than Kentucky, right? And so even though we say it's the World Series, it's World Championship, there's still a larger world out there. And in California, we have people from all ethnic groups. All of us came out of Africa. And as we've dispersed and we've gone all over the world, we've gone to Fiji Islands, we've gone to Australia, we've crossed the Straits and we've come back down, and we're now in South America. The question is, the human genome found that we are 99.9% identical. 99.9% identical. So what's the difference and what makes things actually out of Africa and the African diaspora? So when I talk about the diaspora, you can see some Africans left through the Indian Ocean and they went to India, and then some came across the Indian Ocean and they came to Guyana, they came to Venezuela. I mean, there's just so much admixture that's going on constantly. And so I will have patients who are coming to me and they were like, yeah, my parents are West Indians, right? They grew up in the West Indies. Why do they call it West Indies? Because of this migration. There's so many people on the eastern coast of Africa. They're Kenya, and they were like, yeah, we're Indians, but we are East Africans because that's where our family comes from. And of course, with apartheid South Africa, you have Dutch who left Netherlands and then went to South Africa. And so you have a lot of people who are mixed races on the southern tip of Africa. But the question is, you also have people who went from the westernmost coast of Africa, went to Portugal, and then of course came back down, and you see all this happening constantly. That's how you can have Lagos in Portugal and you can have Lagos in Nigeria, because that's really how the slave route went. So that's your out of Africa theory of early migration. You're not going to understand PRS unless you understand how we're all moving around and just going around, okay? Around whether there's water. And now that there's climate change, everybody is now looking for water. And that's going to be the biggest migration pattern of the future. So, but before we go to the future, let us look at the Babylonian Empire, because this is where you now have Ramadan, you have Muslims in Iraq, you have Jews, and you have Christians, and they're all praying to the same God. This is Easter for those who are praying to the same God. And they're all going across back and forth to the same God, and they're all going across Babylonia. So how many of you know that the BRCA1 mutation started in Iraq, right? And of course, that's dated in before Christ, because that's a different, time zone, right? That's a different time zone. So modern day Iraq, it's in the Bible, depending on what you read. I went to a Requiem Mozart concert yesterday, and I was like, oh my God, Austria and all that beautiful music. People are going back and forth because that was the beginning, sort of the center of the world at that time, as people went back and forth. But then we know genetics, genetic justice. You now see the roots across with Ezra, Nehemiah, the Old Testament, going back and forth, returning to Jerusalem. We all understand the Tigris River, and everybody travels through water. This is Aleppo that we hear about with the Syria bombing. All of these things are all written in history. And this is where some of these mutations come from. So we can't do this genetics work without thinking about the exile, right, the Hellenistic, that's the Greek era, then the Roman era, the old wars, bringing people back and forth, traveling through Cappadocia, Galatia, and then Egypt, and then down to Africa, right? But they all came out of River Nile, and depending on your religion, you're going to be reading a lot of stories about the path out of Egypt. So out of Egypt, we come out, but then out of Egypt, we also have breast cancer. And now we have breast cancer subtypes. So I'm going to fast forward and now talk about, by following this, looking at who gets basal-like breast cancer, who gets lumina A, who gets aggressive breast cancer. We were able to show that you can do genomic assay and you can see how the breast cancer that people get is not one, right? Look at the more African ancestry you have, the more you're likely to get ER negative or unclassified breast cancer. That's the definition of aggressive. The more Japanese, older, that you know, at one point people started taking soy, thinking that it's a soy. Perhaps not. We actually now know that there's some protective factors that get Hispanic women to have a lower risk for breast cancer, to have more ER-positive breast cancer. And if you listen to Dr. Ziv last month, you will hear that this genetic admixture, actually some people may have protection against breast cancer. So stay tuned, because we're not all at equal risk. And it's because we now know that breast cancer is not one disease. So let me get back to estrogen receptor, because that's the key. So once we found out that people were getting ER positive and ER negative, we then started looking at who gets ER negative. We went to Egypt, Sudan, lots of more publications now, Kenya, Uganda, and so many studies, South Africa. And you will find that majority of women still get ER positive breast cancer. This is my critical point. Majority of women, whether you call them Caucasians, and Caucasians only means that you are in the Caucasus. That's not a good way. But this is a slide that I borrowed from the previous publications. Now we don't call them Caucasians. We're just saying, where did you come from? What's your ancestry? So, but depending on how you look at it, people will argue, no matter how you look at it. Most people, hello, please mute yourself if you are not speaking. Most people of African ancestry, 64% get ER positive breast cancer, depending on your definition. But look at the people that we're studying in Ghana and Kenya, right? Only 40% have abundantly ER positive, which means they have more aggressive breast cancer. So ask, where are people coming from? Do they have BRCA1? Do they have BRCA2? That's why we anchored our work on, don't just ask about, are you Black or white? Ask about your ancestry. That's what got me to this woman. 24, by the time she was 35, she had already had bilateral breast cancer. How do you find that type of breast cancer? That's where we were in 1990 when we started our work. And then I told her, you're going to get ovarian cancer if you don't have your ovaries out. And she was like, God cannot do that to me. But this is African American. By 40, her mother had bilateral breast cancer, and she passed this gene on. And the thing is, we don't want that to happen to anybody anymore. We want to find them. So we started then going across the diaspora, Nigeria, Cameroon and Uganda, Brazil, African American, carrier study, looking at who is getting BRCA1. These are population-based studies. And you don't need to be a geneticist to see these are cases, the people who walked in the door with a diagnosis of breast cancer. These are controls. You can see these women in Nigeria are younger than 50. They all had enrichment and they had BRCA1, BRCA2. And then, of course, other genes drop off. Okay, look at the controls. Look at Cameroon and Uganda. Look at Brazil. BRCA1, and this is not just Brazil. We went to Bahia because that's where the African descendants are, in Bahia. And then look at African Americans. You can't, because of the level of admixture. This is the average age of breast cancer is 54. So that's why you can't just say you are Black. So you just, we now see that they don't have the same high rates like these young women, but their average age was 54. We still have, their rate is still twice the rate, or nearly twice the rate, of mostly white women that were in the carrier study who developed breast cancer in their 60s, right? So look at the controls. So most of what we have been doing is trying to find the people who are going to get breast cancer after age 50 in their 60s, and we neglected the women who are young and are getting cancer. So that's why we now changed the wisdom study. And I see that Mary Claire King actually, I have to give her credit, because she was the one who kept saying, we cannot wait until people get cancer to do this work. And I give her credit for letting us do this experiment with her. And we did it. But guess what? We only women. We were studying women. How about the guys? Well, look at where genetic testing is happening now. BRCA1 and BRCA2 can cause prostate cancer. And all of a sudden, men are rising up. The work that Mary Claire King did in Israel actually showed that most people who said they have no family history is because it was coming from their father's side. Look at this man, prostate, 1, 2, 3 generations. The next generation, all men. And the only way you are going to find that somebody in the 4th generation, maybe a great-grandmother died young, but they didn't know what that person had until this person had advanced prostate cancer at age 55. And that's what got him to get tested. And he found that he had a founder mutation that we've been talking about among Jewish women. But I can tell you, I have, in fact, Mr. Bowles, so many men with prostate cancer, they're coming to me and they're saying, why are we not talking to the guys about it? So now they want to talk about men's health. So this is why wisdom is so important, because now we have legislated it. Every patient with breast cancer discuss genetic testing with their doctor. And that's because we now have drugs that we can use to treat. But waiting until you have metastatic cancer is really not good. Upcoming treatment decision when you have ovarian cancer is not prevention. And then we need to now talk about increased surveillance, secondary prevention. Now, family members. The good thing about genetic testing for family members and for all of you on wisdom is, even if you don't have a family history, you can join wisdom. And we lowered the age that you can join to earlier at 30, because we want to catch those young women who may have it from their mother's side. Thank the Black patients who have participated in wisdom. They're saying we cannot wait until 50. We want something to catch those early onset breast cancer. So that's why waiting to test cancer patient is failure of prevention. Why we are doing wisdom, we want precision prevention now. We cannot wait. So the reason why we have to have precision prevention now. My children now are in their are getting to 40. What am I going to tell them? I joined wisdom. Everybody talks about the fastest growing cancer now is premenopausal breast cancer. Increase in estimated new cancer cases between 2020 and 2040. And it's going to be low. So if you look at very high development index countries. So this is where white women live to older ages. Of course, that's what we know now. And then we have neglected people who live in low resource settings, even with people in rural communities in America. We don't know nearly enough about them. That's why we cannot talk about income or, low resource and talk about global without talking about in our own backyard. This is Mexico. This is all of Latin America, right? Medium Human Development Index. They are all in the global south. Look at China, look at India. This is where we need to do the outreach. That's why all cancer sites, any way you look at it, we categorize Hispanic, any race. Then we say non-Hispanic, American, Indian, Alaska. We don't have enough people with non-Hispanic Black, non-Hispanic white, non-Hispanic Asian. Who are we? Anyhow you look at it, this rate per 100,000 is too high for all of us. That's why we cannot rest our oars. So people, the American Association for AACR has talked about race, ethnicity, ancestry, looked about social determinants of health. If we put the patient in the middle and we're looking at cultural belief, behavior, psychosocial, biologic, environment, you know, my husband is an environmentalist, and he thinks that even household air pollution, even the environmental racism, where you put people live in places where they put all the dump site, environmental justice. It's not just socioeconomic, it's everything. And clinical is just one part of it, right? So how are we going to deal with all of those past history so that we can move and break the structural inequities and societal injustices and then come together? So that's why we study the genome. This is us in Chicago. Of course, I took this when Laura and I took us to Napa Valley, where we were in this beautiful place. And until we started studying asthma and environmental pollution across the diaspora. This is a study of asthma among African ancestry populations, the Kappa Consortium. And when they saw that, you know, we did the pan genome from deep sequencing of the genome, and guess what? We were missing 296 base pair. The reference genome didn't even have the African genome in it, but thank God we got that. And so now we're looking beyond highly penetrant mutations to build better models for cancer risk assessment in diverse populations. Do we know what we're doing? Are we missing something? Is it genetics? Is it epigenetics? Are we using the wrong modules? Is it additive? Is it gene environment? Is it gene? We have no idea, but we have to do this work. And that's why we needed the community. When the first genome-wide association studies we did, we put everything together and we tried to say, okay, let's pull everybody together because we don't have the data. And guess what? When we pulled all the data together, guess what? The one thing we found was that it may have to do with your immune system, right? And now we're studying immunity. How do we have this immune system breakdown that people then develop cancer? Is it our microbiome? Is it what we eat? Is it our lifestyle? Is it not exercising? Is it obesity? And so our team, together with Dr. Ho, we are looking at overall breast cancer risk. Can we develop a lifetime risk of breast cancer in African Americans? So we've developed one for overall breast cancer risk, one for ER positive breast cancer, one for ER negative breast cancer, because we can't just lump everybody together. And then when we actually start with our own ethnic specific SNPs, we actually see better separation because we want to use SNPs that are developed for ER positive and then for ER negative. It's not perfect, but these SNPs can tell us the people who are in the top 90 percentile, people who are going to get breast cancer. If we do a cutoff point, people who are going to get breast cancer before 40, people who are going to get breast cancer before 45, people who are going to get breast cancer before 50. That's who we are talking about. And if we even move it and we want to see the separation for ER negative, that's the beauty of PRS, that we want to not say one size fits all. Let's all start screening beginning at age 50, because we're going to miss it. We want people who are going to get interval cancer. We want people who are in their 70s and they're in this top percentile. That's why we want to get everybody to do the wisdom study, right? Because we're going to use this. And then I want to tell you my Chicago alternative prevention study, a lot has been in the news now. Everybody is having their breast take, young women, once they have breast cancer, just do bilateral mastectomy. But I'm in the Midwest. We are Terra Pharma. When patients come to me, they don't want to have their breast removed. So I also want to really honor this young investigator. So my postdoc, Anna Woodard, is a breast cancer survivor of triple-negative breast cancer. She's alive today because she's on immunotherapy. But she keeps telling me, why did I get breast cancer under the age of 30? Could I have known about it? Could I have done something about it? And she's determined to do better models. And Dr. Shubomi came to me and wants to be a radiologist, and Greg Kazma and I, and we're looking for this tiny cancer. That's what we want to find. If you are at risk for ER-negative breast cancer, we want to find your tiny cancer. And the only way we're going to find it is if we can do genotype, subtype-specific screening for prevention, early detection, and cancer interception. And we can do it by building better models. Under Wisdom, we're going to use AI. We're going to build better models. Dr. Yala is at San Diego as part of Athena Breast Cancer Network. We're going to, with one mammogram, we can build better models. We can integrate it. And we want to use abbreviated ultra-fast MRI data. We want everything we do to be cheaper, faster, and more accurate than conventional MRI or mammography. So that's what the Chicago Alternative Prevention is. And we're, of course, because we've participated in research across the diaspora, we're also using the Gale model, right? We so many things that we need to build, but we are also developing a model that will do better across the diaspora, across everybody. The Finnish breast cancer study just came up with how they did their population specific. It's good for Finland. So what's going to be good for African Americans? What's going to be good for Latinos? We don't know. We're going to build it together. So that's really where we are. Precision prevention. One size doesn't fit all, especially in the context of elevated risk and diverse population. So that's really where I am. I got this photograph from my trip to Vietnam. And Vietnam, they love flowers, and they just showered me with flowers because we need to be all in this together. And I can't thank my good buddies at UCSF enough for really bringing us onto this. And so they have an era of hope. We are all in it together. All the women who are in beauty parlors, we need to talk to everybody to do this work. So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing, and then we'll take some questions.
Thank you so much, Funmi. Very, very interesting, and something that I think many of us probably haven't heard before. So thank you for walking us through that history and approach, and also noting where Wisdom is helping to try and address some of these big questions. There's a lot that we're trying to do. You brought up environmental risk factors. That's actually something we just got some additional funding to do, which is really exciting, is to start to gather residential and occupational health histories and really start to also look at some of the biologic factors as well. So, one of the great benefits of Wisdom is that we have this huge, strong cohort and platform, and all of the participants, many of them are here today, are really integral in contributing to helping find the knowledge and help to develop better approaches so that we can have this precision prevention approach across the board. Yeah, so if people have questions, please feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat, and we'd be happy to answer those. I know there was a question earlier about AI and breast imaging and whether that was an added service that was worthwhile at this point, if you had to pay out of pocket for it. That was one question that came up. So anyway.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question about AI. I mean, the thing that I'm excited about is that, we all know our shortcoming with screening, but, screening got us to a place. And because it got us to a place, we have survivors now who are pushing us to get to the next level and who are pushing us to do things in solidarity. So this is just the beginning. And we're hoping that we will be able to really be more inclusive with everything we do. Because do you know how millions of mammograms are done in this country every year? When we have looked at Chicago and why are we failing women with density? And it's because, the quality of mammography in some places is not what it should be. And so that's why we really need to begin to do precision and target people at risk. And the only way we're going to learn what works and what doesn't work is when we are inclusive and everybody can get personal with their risk. So I joined Wisdom, and guess what? My risk factor was that my BMI was a little to the high risk side. And I was like, yeah, in 40 years of living in America, I got lazy. My BMI was going high. So get what the most important risk factor for breast cancer that we're not going to add to the Wisdom risk assessment other than density. It is BMI.
Actually, Funmi, BMI is now part of BCSC.
Yeah.
It's actually part of BCSC now.
Yeah, so BMI. And so when I got my result and it's like my BMI is, I was like, I'm going to get back to my weight that I was when I came to this country. Wish me luck, right? Because it's 40 years and 40 pounds.
Sure.
Right? But at least when in my clinic, I keep telling everybody, maybe I need to walk, let's walk, let's increase our metabolism. Let's learn about it. Maybe my weight is perfect. Maybe it's just because I needed to be protected from something. That's why my hips are wide. I don't know, but let's figure it out together. And so that's why we are all looking. Alcohol, alcohol is #1 risk factor in young women. And I asked, is it the alcohol you drank when you were, in college, or the alcohol you drink now? So all of us have to
Actually,
think about.
so Walter Willett was on in December, Funmi.
Yes.
And he showed that data, and he said that it is like hormone replacement therapy. If you stop, your risk does go down, which is a good thing. But there is a concern that the increase in incidence in young women may be related to drinking. And so someone was saying to me, well, I don't drink very much, but then it turns out she has like 5 glasses of wine on the weekends when she drinks. And I'm like, okay, that's a lot.
Yeah. And the reason why I'm actually really, really excited because of our work in East Africa and West Africa. So West Africa is all tropical. There's no cold, and women don't drink because they're either Muslim or Christian. And you go to East Africa and you can see the amount of alcohol these women are drinking, and they have ER-positive breast cancer. So Lancet Commission is going to come up and say, you have to stop drinking, period, right? And we have, just like with tobacco, we're going to be fighting with, the alcohol industry because, we fought tobacco, and now tobacco, keeping your weight down, is the #1 cancer that kills women. And now women, we just have to be honest. We can't drink and just think we are like men. That's why this rise in breast cancer, premenopausal, is scary. We're not having more children, and then we're drinking. So all the things that have changed in our generation is alarming. And so that's why we have to be honest with all our participants, do your risk assessment and make the modification. Some alcohol is good. I just came from Paris. You just don't get drunk. Have a little wine, but not the extent that we have been drinking.
That's what we say. If you want to have more than 1 glass of wine when you drink, pick 1 night a week to drink. And if you just want to have a glass, you can have it on 2 or 3 nights.
Yeah. And then, if you must drink, then take folic acid, because the interaction with ER-negative breast cancer is really important. And, women, reproductive age, you are supposed to be on folic acid anyway. So I tell my children, take your prenatal vitamins, whether you want to get pregnant or not, just just to hedge your bet, because there's an
For me,
interaction.
the R01 with the screening, you can
Yeah.
participate anywhere, right?
Well, yeah, yes, we are really looking to expand that outer one, and we're gonna. By the way, for those in California, San Diego, if you are able to come to the AACR, there's going to be a cancer prevention town hall, just so that we can talk about these things, right? We don't have to wait, and I think the NCI is really making the effort to get all of us excited about prevention and not waiting. The cancer moonshot, it's about let's all move a little more, let's all do. And then for those who have survived breast cancer, we don't want them to, we can predict risk of second cancer as well. That's what is exciting about this. And so
Funmi, there was a question in the chat. If I had uterine cancer, should I do genetic testing?
yes, any cancer, you should just, because obesity is the #1 risk factor for uterine cancer. But we also know that there's some genes in the Lynch syndrome, endometrial cancer and breast cancer. Obesity in I have to my levels of sugar. But in Europe, they make it take so many sugary drinks by taxing, Coca-Cola, taxing tobacco. But nobody wants to do that in America. Make sure you can take fresh fruits and buy junk food that to eat healthy. So I don't want to
Funmi, you're breaking up just a little bit.
Yeah, I think my phone is about to die. My computer is about to die.
Okay.
So if I die, I'm trying to plug my phone.
Okay. And then I see another question about male breast cancer and whether there are any men in the studies. I think in Wisdom, we do have a criteria where you identify as female. I believe there are other studies more specific to male breast cancer, maybe not necessarily risk, but in diagnosis and treatment. I don't know, Funmi, if you have any, or Laura, have any input on that too.
I would just say for screening, the risk for men is tenfold less. I mean, even men who are BRCA2, still have a pretty low risk relative to a low risk woman. So it's not ideal to include men in a screening study. In treatment studies, they're eligible for I-SPY. We don't usually diagnose DCIS. So I think men should be allowed to be in any treatment study, but it doesn't really make sense, for them to be part of a screening study at this point. We're once we really, really have it down and we figured out what predicts fast growing tumors and high risk of that, then that could be something we could extend once we've.
Yeah. And maybe I can just say something about that. I think we want to be inclusive. And so every time that we talk about screening, and I always get the question about, gender, male, female, and the fact that men are not getting tested. I'm actually really pushing for men's health, that, just like we should have a wisdom for men, so that we can get people through prostate cancer screening. But the problem, even, Mr. Knowles had male breast cancer, and he was not diagnosed early. And he's out there saying we shouldn't even call it breast cancer for men because it's chest wall. There's just, we still have a lot of stigma to get to get over. And so whenever a man comes in with BRCA2, they're just very devastated because they feel that they, are giving this to their daughters and they're more concerned. But if it's a woman, the woman is a survivor. Women, get health care for the family, but men it's a lot harder for them. So for those of you who are genetic counselors or who want to participate, we're actually doing a conference in Chicago which is really going to be bringing, diverse voices to talk about genetics. How do you, we have a global community, and they are asking, what does it mean to get tested in Brazil, for example? Does everybody have access to what they need to be able to actually, beat cancer? And how do you provide genetic? We don't have enough genetic counseling available for everybody. So who's coming, who is not? So I think, this is, it's work in progress. And we just want to make sure that, if you go to our CMA office, I'm just going to put the upcoming meeting into for everybody, so we can, yeah.
Well, I know we're up on time. Thanks to those who are still on and able to ask questions, but I think we will wrap it up. If you do have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us and we can try and get those answered for you. I'll put our email address in the chat. And if you do know anyone who is interested in participating in Wisdom, it is open for all women between the ages of 30 and 74 anywhere across the country. You don't have to go to a specific clinic or see a specific doctor. You can actually participate from the comfort of home. It's an important study, as Dr. Olopade was just mentioning. We can all help to not only learn our own risk, but also to help contribute to the science and the knowledge to help to refine risk assessment and identification of those at high risk and prevention strategies. So we can all be in this together, trying to improve and learn and improve our outcomes for all women as well. So please do share the Wisdom study. And if you're interested in helping to share it further across your networks, we have messages and materials that you're welcome to share. We'd be happy to send those to you as well. So again, many, many thanks to Dr. Olopade. Thank you so much for your insights and knowledge today. And would love to follow up with anyone who has additional questions after this. I put the email in the chat.
And before everybody leaves, we have to sing happy birthday to Laura,
yes.
because March 24th was her birthday yesterday. And I remembered at midnight and I was like, I'm not going to wake her up. So let's sing happy birthday to Laura.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Am I the only one?
Happy birthday, dear Laura.
Laura.
Happy
birthday to you.
Thank
right.
you, Funmi.
All
And
right.
why do I think Laura was up at midnight?
I know,
I
I
was
think so too.
Yeah.
Actually, I
knew she
told
was up.
Catherine, I can't remember what it was that you asked me about. I said, oh, well, Funmi called me and I didn't get to the phone in time, but someone else was calling me. So, oh, Funmi, right back that you want to be, we have to talk about Rise Up. We should talk about the Rise Up for breast cancer at one of our next forums.
Yes.
Wonderful. Yes.
Funmi, I can, you don't have to send it. I assume you accept being on the organizing committee, yes?
Of
Yes.
course, of course, of course.
All right. So our next forum it's always the last Monday of the month unless it falls on a holiday. So the next forum is on April 29th. I think the topic that we would like to discuss is the kind of rise of incidence of breast cancer in younger women and sort of what the data is looking like and how Wisdom is adapting to try and identify women at younger ages so that hopefully we can intervene and offer some prevention options for women before they're diagnosed. So please stay tuned. We'll send around some information on that topic. But again, thanks so much for joining this evening and looking forward to seeing you all again in April.
And it's really, really important that we do this together. Yeah, really, really important.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Okay,
Bye.
right.